She deserves it more, honey, Mom said, not even looking up from the stack of gourmet cupcakes she was arranging on a tiered display stand. Jessica's always been more dedicated to her studies. You've always had other interests. The words landed like a slap I hadn't braced for. I stood there, still in my scrubs, my medical school diploma barely a week old, framed and fresh, trying to process what I'd just heard. Mom? We both graduated with honors, I said quietly. We had the exact same GPA. My voice didn't waver, but my hands were trembling. Audrey. She sighed, finally glancing up with that same cool look I'd grown up with. Your sister doesn't have a wealthy mentor like Dr. Flemington taking an interest in her future. You've had advantages Jessica didn't. I almost laughed. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. Dr. Vivian Fleming wasn't some trust fund savior. She was my research advisor, and I'd earned her mentorship through 2 years of 80-hour weeks in the lab while Jessica was skiing in Aspen with our parents. My advantage, working myself to exhaustion, while Jessica had every emotional and financial resource handed to her on a sterling platter. So I'm being punished for finding my own opportunities? I asked, my tone calm too calm. Behind me, Dad stepped into the kitchen, placing a comforting hand on Mom's shoulder. No one's punishing you, Audrey, he said with his usual dismissive calm. We're just being practical. Jessica needs more help. You've always been more resourceful. Resourceful. That word. The same word they'd used when they skipped my undergrad research symposium to fly cross-country for one of Jessica's volleyball tournaments. The same word they used when Jessica got a new Volkswagen on her 21st birthday and I got a $50 Shell gas card. Tomorrow was Jessica's debt-free celebration party, a rooftop soiree in downtown Detroit. Classy, extravagant, undoubtedly expensive, funded entirely by our parents. They'd invited the entire extended family, our med school faculty, even the dean. The invitation read, celebrating Dr. Jessica Collins, debt-free and destined for greatness. No mention of me. No acknowledgement that we'd crossed the same finish line. I grabbed my bag. I've got an early shift tomorrow at the hospital. Mom's voice chased me as I walked toward the door. Will you still make it to Jessica's party? Not for me, not out of concern. Out of fear, I'd make Jessica's moment less perfect. I'll be there, I said, even as the thought made my stomach twist. As I slid into my car, my phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Fleming Need to speak urgently about the Patterson Fellowship. Big news. My heart skipped. For weeks, I'd waited to hear back about the most competitive neurosurgical research fellowship in the country, Johns Hopkins. Only one graduating student nationwide would get it. Was this it? I stared at the message. And in that quiet moment, sitting alone in my car, headlights glowing against our suburban driveway, I realized something chilling. My parents' favoritism wasn't just unfair. It was about to become publicly humiliating. And there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop what came next. But I had no idea just how far it would go. The next day came faster than I expected. The morning sunlight felt sharper, more judgmental, like even nature was bracing for the evening ahead. I arrived at Dr. Fleming's office just after 10 a.m., nerves twisting in my chest. Her door was already open. Audrey, she said, standing that familiar spark in her steely blue eyes. Sit, I have extraordinary news. My heart hammered. The committee made their decision on the Patterson Fellowship. I held my breath. They've selected you. The words hit like lightning. I blinked. Congratulations, Dr. Audrey Collins, you're going to Baltimore. Joy, disbelief, validation. It all crashed over me in a wave so intense I forgot how to speak. Dr. Fleming smiled. You earned this, she said firmly. Your research on neurovascular regeneration after traumatic injury was groundbreaking. The committee was especially impressed by your dual-method approach, combining surgical innovation with pharmacological treatment. That kind of insight doesn't come from textbooks, Audrey. That comes from you. The fellowship came with everything housing stipend, full salary, and total loan forgiveness. I would be debt-free, just like Jessica, but through my work, my mind. There's more. Dr. Fleming continued, her tone shifting slightly. "I've been invited to Jessica's celebration tonight. Your parents extended the invitation to faculty." My heart sank. "I'd like to announce your fellowship news there if you're comfortable with that." I froze. My gut clenched. "I don't know," I admitted. "It's Jessica's night. My parents might see it as me trying to steal her spotlight." Dr. Fleming tilted her head, a faint frown on her lips. "Audrey," she said, her voice firmer now, "I've seen how your parents speak about you, how they've minimized your accomplishments and inflated your sisters. This recognition, it needs to be heard. And sometimes the only way for something to be acknowledged is for it to be public." I swallowed hard. She was right. If my parents found out in private, they'd downplay it, reframe it as a fluke, a lucky break. "Okay," I said softly, "you can announce it." As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed again. "Jessica, Mom's going overboard for tonight. It's embarrassing. Wish she put this much effort into celebrating both of us. See you there, Har." I blinked. Jessica. Acknowledging the imbalance, that was a first. Before I could reply, another message lit up the screen. "Mom, don't forget business casual tonight. And please let your sister have her moment. This is very important to her." The contrast made my stomach flip. Maybe Jessica had noticed. Maybe she'd just never said anything. Maybe tonight. The lines we'd drawn between us since childhood were finally starting to blur. Maybe. But nothing could have prepared me for what that party would reveal. Because some truths don't whisper. They shatter everything. And that night, something was about to break. Jessica's debt-free celebration was held at one of those rooftop restaurants in downtown Detroit that smelled like money. The kind of place where champagne flowed like water, and everything from the lighting to the linen was curated for Instagram perfection. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out into a terrace, lit with soft golds and blues, summer twilight hanging low over the skyline. A massive banner read, "Congratulations, Dr. Jessica Collins." No mention of me. There were framed photos of her journey: Jessica at her white coat ceremony, Jessica at match day, Jessica holding up her acceptance letter to Michigan Med. In a few group shots I appeared, fuzzy background decoration. I smoothed down my navy dress, took a breath, and stepped into the fray. "Audrey." Jessica spotted me, immediately breaking away from a group of family, friends, and relatives. She looked gorgeous in a silver cocktail dress, her blonde bob catching the terrace lights just right. "Thank God you're here," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Aunt Patty's already asked me 5 times if I have a boyfriend. You might need to fake date someone before dessert." I laughed, relieved, confused. This didn't feel like a rivalry, not with her, not right now. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "That I'm married to medicine. But if she knows any single neurosurgeons, I'm open to referrals." We laughed again. For a moment, we were just sisters. Then our mother appeared. "Jessica, the Hendersons just arrived," she said, glass of champagne in hand. "You remember Thomas Henderson, chief of surgery at Cleveland Memorial? You should come say hello." She took Jessica's arm, steering her away, then turned back to me, briefly. "Audrey, would you mind checking if the caterers have set out the gluten-free desserts? Your cousin Beth is on one of her diet kicks again." And just like that, I was the help. By the time I returned to the terrace, Jessica was being paraded in front of hospital administrators and former professors like she was the next coming of Florence Nightingale. I drifted to the edge of the event, sipping water and pretending to be invisible. That's when I saw Dr. Fleming. She looked stunning in a crimson pantsuit, gliding through the room like she owned it. She found me immediately. "Audrey," she said, pulling me into a hug, "ready for the announcement." "Honestly," I whispered, "it feels complicated." She surveyed the room, the banners, the cake, the slideshow. "More complicated than I realized," she murmured. Across the rooftop, I saw my parents introducing Jessica to Dr. Margaret Wu, the chief of neurosurgery at Detroit Medical Center, one of the hospitals I'd applied to for residency. My gut twisted. Were they trying to hand Jessica my spot? Dr. Fleming noticed. Before I could react, my father spotted her and came over Jessica and my mother in tow. "Dr. Fleming," he said, smiling wide. "So thrilled you could join us. I understand you've worked with Audrey on something." Dr. Fleming's eyebrow arched slow and deliberate. "Audrey has been my primary research partner for the last 2 years," she said coolly. "Her work on pediatric brain injuries was integral to our study's success." My parents' faces twitched just slightly. "Well, that's very nice," my mother said. "Jessica's also done neurosurgical research. In fact, Dr. Wu was just saying how impressed she is with Jessica's residency application." I blinked. Jessica hadn't done neurosurgical research. Her focus was neuropsychiatry. My parents were lying right to a top program director's face. Dr. Fleming smiled, but there was steel in her voice. "That's surprising. I was under the impression Jessica's interests were clinical psychiatry, not surgical interventions." Silence, thick, awkward. I looked at Jessica. She wasn't gloating. She looked uncomfortable. Something in the room had shifted, and the truth. The spotlight wasn't Jessica's anymore. It was mine, but I hadn't even begun to realize how big that spotlight was about to get. Dinner had begun. The guests were seated at long candlelit tables on the rooftop terrace. My parents were at the head table, of course, flanked by Jessica, our grandparents, and Dr. Wu. I was placed 3 tables down, next to Cousin Beth and her boyfriend of the month, surrounded by distant relatives who barely remembered my name, close enough to hear my father's booming voice, too far to be part of the conversation. "We always knew Jessica was destined for greatness," he was saying to Dr. Wu, "even when they were little. Jessica was our ambitious one, driven, focused." Every word was a scalpel, precise, deliberate. I stared down at my plate, appetite gone. Across the room, Dr. Fleming met my eyes. She gave me the faintest nod, reassurance or permission. The silverware clinked. The breeze swirled softly over the city lights, and then my father stood up, tapping his glass. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our daughter Jessica's remarkable achievement," he began. "As many of you know, medical school is a grueling journey. To emerge not only with a degree but debt-free is truly special." Applause, light, polite, empty. Then my mother stood. "We've always believed in investing in our daughter's future. Jessica has made us proud every step of the way." That word again, invested, as if their love came with receipts. I felt the pressure building in my chest, grief, rage, years of silence swelling like a storm behind my ribs. And then Jessica stood up. "Actually," she said, voice surprisingly steady, "I'd like to say something." Every head turned. Even I looked up in shock. "This celebration feels incomplete," she said, scanning the crowd landing on me. "Audrey and I both graduated. We had identical GPAs. We both worked hard, but honestly, Audrey worked harder." The rooftop went still, not quiet, frozen. My parents stiffened. My mother's mouth opened slightly. "Jessica," she hissed. "No, Mom, it's the truth." Jessica's voice didn't waver. "Audrey did it without the kind of support I had. She worked jobs. She built relationships. She earned every inch of her success without being handed anything." The silence was seismic. Then my father chuckled too loud. "Of course we're proud of both our girls," he said, his tone straining. "Audrey has done well too, but tonight is about celebrating Jessica being debt-free, which is, well, a very specific achievement." Jessica turned to him. "An achievement you and Mom paid for, not one I earned." My breath caught. Then Dr. Fleming stood up, graceful, commanding. "If I may," she said, and the entire terrace turned toward her. "This feels like an appropriate time to share some news about Audrey Collins." My parents turned pale. Audrey's groundbreaking research in neurovascular regeneration has earned her the Patterson Fellowship at Johns Hopkins. Gasps. A few outright woes. Someone even clapped prematurely. "For those unfamiliar," she continued, "this is the most competitive research fellowship in the country. One position, one student, nationwide." Eyes turned to me. The committee cited Audrey's independent dual-method innovation as revolutionary. She achieved this while managing a full clinical load and mentoring younger students. Her insight, her leadership, and her stamina are extraordinary. I heard murmurs ripple through the crowd. Recognition, respect. For me. Dr. Fleming smiled, then added, "Additionally, our department has approved a full scholarship award to retroactively cover Audrey's remaining medical school loans in recognition of her unparalleled contributions." I was debt-free, just like Jessica, only I'd earned every cent of it. Applause broke out, louder this time, sustained. People I hadn't spoken to in years were craning their necks to see me, smiling, nodding. Whispers of "that's her" echoing around the terrace. My parents sat like statues, drained, silent. Jessica came to my side, her champagne glass raised. "To my sister," she said, clinking gently against mine. "Patterson Fellow, freaking Johns Hopkins. Why didn't you tell me?" I smiled faintly. "I only found out this morning, and I didn't want to overshadow your night." She frowned. "This ridiculous party was never my idea. I told them it was over the top and unfair. But you know how they are once they've decided something." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in years I didn't see the golden child. I saw my sister. "You did?" I asked softly. "Of course I did," she said, eyes flashing. "Audrey, I've always seen it. I just didn't know how to speak up without tearing things apart." I stared at her stunned, and that's when Dr. Wu walked up. "Dr. Collins," she said, smiling at me, "I was very impressed by Dr. Fleming's remarks. If you ever decide to bring your work to Detroit instead of Johns Hopkins, please know our neurosurgery department would be honored to have you." Before I could stammer a response, Jessica jumped in. "Thank you, Dr. Wu," she said proudly, arm around me. "But I'm afraid she's already locked in for greatness. Though if she ever decides to revolutionize a second hospital, we'll let you know." Dr. Wu laughed and nodded. "Keep us in mind, both of you." As she walked away, I turned to Jessica. "You didn't have to do that. You want to stay in Detroit." "I still can," she interrupted, "but not like this. Not by stepping on your shoulders or letting Mom and Dad stack the deck. That's not who I want to be." Across the terrace, I saw our parents finally rise from their table. They looked lost, and for once they were the ones pushing through the crowd to reach me. But they were already too late. They approached cautiously like guests at a funeral they weren't sure they should attend. Dad adjusted his collar. Mom clutched her champagne flute like a lifeline. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. "Dr. Fleming certainly had some impressive things to say about you," my father began. His voice was tight, like he was struggling to hold on to control. "The Patterson Fellowship, that's quite the honor." My mother nodded quickly. "Why didn't you tell us you were even being considered?" she asked, the tone almost accusatory. "You never mentioned it." I tilted my head, watching them both. "Would it have mattered?" I asked softly. They flinched. A full silent beat passed. "We've always supported you, Audrey," Dad said. "In different ways," Mom added quickly. "You were always the independent one. Jessica needed more, she struggled more." I took a long breath, steadying myself. "That's convenient," I said. "But it doesn't explain why you attended every one of Jessica's presentations, but skipped mine. Why you paid for her MCAT prep and told me to be resourceful. Why you covered her rent for 4 years while I was juggling part-time jobs and clinical rotations." My mother's eyes welled with tears. "That's not fair." "No," I said, calm but cold, "it's not." They stood frozen. For the first time in my life, they were speechless. Then salvation. My phone rang. Dr. Fleming. "Excuse me," I said, stepping away. "Hi, Dr. Fleming." "Yes, now's perfect." I turned my back on them as I answered the conversation about housing logistics and my fellowship beginning. Behind me, I felt their presence fade. For once, I didn't need them to understand. I had earned my worth. 3 weeks later, the apartment was almost empty. Boxes stacked, final items packed walls bare. Jessica sat on the windowsill watching as I taped up a final box of books. "I still can't believe you're leaving next week," she said. "Baltimore won't know what hit it." I smiled. "Neither will you once you're doing triple overnight rotations in psych." She laughed, but then her face sobered. "I've been thinking about what Mom and Dad did, or didn't do, I guess. For so long I thought I was lucky because they focused on me, but now I think they actually held me back." I sat beside her. "You didn't do anything wrong, Jess." She shook her head. "I didn't do enough right either. I should have spoken up years ago. I saw it. I just didn't know how to fix it." "You did," I said quietly. "That night, you fixed it." She gave a small smile. "Mom keeps crying. Dad's telling everyone about his brilliant daughter at Johns Hopkins like he personally discovered you." I snorted. "Let them talk. It doesn't matter anymore. Their approval, it used to feel like oxygen. Now it just feels like noise." She nodded slowly. "So, what happens with us now?" I reached over, took her hand. "We find our own way, not the version of us they wrote, the one we write ourselves." Her grip tightened. "I'd like that." "Me too." Outside, the moving truck pulled up to the curb. Inside, I finally exhaled. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like peace. The morning I left Detroit, the sky was overcast, one of those soft gray clouds kind of days that felt more like a sigh than a storm. Jessica stood by the curb as the movers loaded the last of my boxes into the truck. She held a to-go coffee in one hand, my favorite order, written neatly in Sharpie on the side, for Dr. Audrey Collins, world changer. "I'm going to keep this in my office," she said, holding up a framed photo of the two of us at our med school white coat ceremony. "For when patients ask if I have a superhero sibling." I smiled. "Just tell them I'm the quiet one who works in the shadows. Batman of brain science," she teased. Something like that. The final box was sealed, the apartment echoing with the absence of everything familiar. Jessica walked me to my car. "I keep thinking about how much time we lost," she said softly. "Letting them define who we were to each other, letting them make you invisible so I could shine brighter. I don't want that anymore." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Neither do I." She blinked fast. "Baltimore better know how lucky it is. You better text me before your first overnight rotation melts your soul." We hugged tight, real and unspoken. And then I got into my car. As I pulled away, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. Not at the building, at Jessica, at the version of her who finally saw me, at the version of me who had stopped waiting for our parents to. Baltimore was a blur at first, new city, new rhythms, a whirlwind of responsibilities that made medical school look like a dress rehearsal. But I flourished. The Patterson Fellowship was more than prestigious, it was liberating. I led early-stage research into regenerative pathways for pediatric brain trauma. I published 2 co-authored papers by the end of my second month. Dr. Fleming continued to mentor me long distance, and eventually I mentored others. I stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped comparing, stopped waiting, until one day in late fall I received a letter. It was from my parents. Inside were 2 things. A short handwritten note in my mother's delicate cursive. "We're proud of you. We're sorry it took us this long to say it out loud." A birthday card from when I was 10, one I'd never seen. On the inside was a check long expired and a note that read, "Jessica, we're so proud of our shining star. Love Mom and Dad." They must have found it while cleaning out old files. Maybe they meant to show me. Maybe they wanted to apologize. Maybe it didn't matter anymore. Because for the first time, I didn't feel crushed by that kind of memory. I felt free from it. The following spring, Jessica came to visit me in Baltimore. We walked along the harbor, 2 doctors finally talking like sisters. She told me she'd taken on a new residency initiative, her idea, her leadership, no parental hand-holding. I told her about the new clinical trial I was leading. We laughed about our old arguments. We cried once briefly when we both realized how much we had missed in each other's lives. But mostly, we walked forward, together. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't a confrontation. It's a life fully lived without apology. It's finding your own light even when your family insists on standing in your shadow. And it's knowing deep down that you don't need anyone's permission to shine. Not anymore. Have you ever been the overlooked one in your family? Did you fight to be seen or choose to walk away and build your own life? Share your story in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience, revelation, and redemption. You matter. Even if they never said it, you were never invisible.